What an incredible story of kindness, generosity, and leadership. But now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? How do you think John's actions changed the company for the better? Let me know in the comments below. Your thoughts really matter to me, and it's always amazing to see how far these stories reach. And hey, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. It's going to be just as powerful and inspiring. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. This CEO went incognito and found a hidden hero in his store. John Thomas was no ordinary CEO. At 45, he was the proud founder of Thomas Mart, a successful chain of convenience stores that had rapidly expanded in the last decade. What started as a small shop in a quiet neighborhood had now grown into a thriving franchise with dozens of locations. But as the business grew, John found himself drifting further away from the everyday operations. Reports and numbers alone couldn't give him the full picture anymore. He wondered if his employees felt valued, or if the vision for excellent customer service he had built was still being upheld. It bothered him, but he wasn't sure how to fix it. He knew he couldn't just rely on the data or hear it secondhand from managers. He needed to see it for himself, to experience what was truly happening in his stores. So he decided to do something drastic. He would disguise himself as a regular worker and visit one of his stores unannounced. It was risky, but John knew this was the only way to get the honest answers he needed. He picked the third store he had opened, located in a busy urban area. It was one of the top-performing locations, and he was determined to see for himself if everything was running smoothly. John dressed in old jeans, a hoodie, and a baseball cap to conceal his identity. His hair was messy, and he grew out a scruffy beard to complete the look. He wanted to blend in and not be recognized. When he entered the store early that morning, it was already bustling with activity. Customers were browsing the shelves, employees were stocking products, and the hum of chatter filled the air. The store felt alive, and John took a moment to soak it all in. He walked to the front and introduced himself to the store manager, Tom, as Mike, a temporary worker assigned by headquarters to help with stocking and organizing. Tom, a middle-aged man with a friendly face, welcomed him warmly and quickly put him to work. As John began his task, he watched carefully, noting the atmosphere, interactions, and little details. This was just the beginning of his undercover journey, and John was ready to learn the truth. As John continued working undercover, he couldn't help but notice one employee who stood out, Chris, a young cashier in his early 20s. Despite the hustle and bustle around him, Chris maintained a cheerful attitude, greeting every customer with a smile and making small talk with the regulars. What really impressed John was how Chris seemed to genuinely connect with the customers. He remembered their names, asked about their families, and always went the extra mile to make them feel valued. It was a level of customer service that went beyond the basics, and John could see it wasn't just part of his job, it was who Chris was. But there was more to Chris's actions than just his friendly demeanor. As John was stocking shelves near the counter, he overheard a conversation between Chris and an elderly customer. The man, wearing a worn-out jacket, was buying a loaf of bread and some milk. Chris greeted him by name. "Mr. Thompson, don't worry about the total today. It's on me." The old man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the gesture. Chris, with a smile, reassured him, "It's fine. I've got it." John watched in disbelief as Chris covered the elderly man's small bill, even though he didn't have to. This act of kindness left John stunned. Why would a cashier pay out of his own pocket for a customer's groceries? It was something John had never expected to see. Intrigued and deeply moved, he decided to observe Chris more closely. Over the next few hours, John noticed Chris quietly helping several other customers in need. He covered small bills, gave discounts when he could, and even added extra items to bags without charging them at the end of the transaction. Chris's actions were small, but they made a huge difference to the people he helped. John couldn't shake the feeling that something special was happening here. This wasn't just about good customer service. This was genuine care for people. The realization hit him hard. Chris wasn't just a cashier. He was someone who made people feel seen, heard, and valued. John felt a deep respect for Chris, and knew this was only the beginning of what he needed to understand about his employees and the heart of his business. The more John observed Chris, the more he realized there was a lot more to the young cashier than met the eye. Chris wasn't just a friendly face. He was carrying a heavy burden, one that no one else seemed to notice. As John continued to work alongside him, he struck up casual conversations with the other employees, hoping to understand more about Chris's background. It was during a break in the stockroom that John learned something that shook him to his core. Bill, an older stockroom worker who had been at the store for years, casually mentioned, "You know, that kid Chris has a rough life." John's curiosity was piqued. Bill went on. His dad passed away when Chris was a teenager. He's been working odd jobs ever since to support his younger brother. Doesn't take a day off, even when he's sick. He's a good kid, but I worry about him. He's always given to others, but no one's really looking out for him. John's heart sank. Here was Chris, this vibrant, energetic young man who was always the first to lend a hand, the first to make someone's day a little better. But behind that smile was a story of loss, sacrifice, and a life full of hardship. Chris was doing everything he could to help those around him, but who was helping him? John couldn't stop thinking about Chris as he continued his undercover work the next day. As the hours passed, he realized that Chris's kindness wasn't just a fluke, it was who he was. Every small act of generosity, every smile, every extra effort to make someone else's day better was part of a deeper, more meaningful purpose. Chris wasn't just offering small kindnesses, he was offering a piece of himself. John's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Here was a young man who, despite his own struggles, was going above and beyond for everyone else. Yet he was invisible to most people, his quiet sacrifice going unnoticed. John knew he had to do something, but what could he possibly do to repay such kindness and dedication? The answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain: he couldn't let Chris's story go unnoticed. After working undercover for several days, John's respect for Chris grew deeper. He had witnessed firsthand how Chris was tirelessly helping others, even though he had his own struggles. Every act of kindness, every moment he spent going above and beyond for customers, spoke volumes about the kind of person Chris was. But John couldn't ignore the reality that no one was really looking out for him. Chris, despite his giving nature, was sacrificing so much for others while putting his own needs aside. That's when John made up his mind. He had to reveal his identity and show Chris that his kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. After the store closed one evening, John gathered the entire team for a meeting. The employees, who had been going about their duties unaware, stopped in their tracks when they saw John step up to the front of the room. He took off his hoodie and baseball cap, revealing his true identity as the CEO of Thomas Mart. The room fell silent. Everyone stared in shock, especially Chris, whose eyes widened in disbelief. "Hi, everyone," John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm John Thomas, the CEO of Thomas Mart. I've been working here undercover for the past few days, and I have to say, it's been an eye-opening experience." He paused, looking around at the employees who had no idea who he was. "I wanted to see firsthand what's happening in my stores, and what I've witnessed has been incredible. But there's one person in particular I need to speak to." John turned to face Chris, whose face was still frozen in shock. "Chris," John said, his voice softening, "your kindness, your generosity, what you do for these customers every day, it hasn't gone unnoticed. You go above and beyond for people who don't always have the means to give back. You don't do it for recognition, but I want you to know, I see you. You've inspired me, and I want to reward you for that." Chris blinked, clearly overwhelmed, as John continued. "Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to a management position, and you'll receive a significant raise. But that's not all. I'm also offering to pay for your brother's education, and we're setting up a fund to help employees in need across all of our locations." Tears welled up in Chris's eyes. "You don't have to do that," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I don't help people for anything in return." John smiled warmly. "That's exactly why you deserve it, Chris. Your selflessness is exactly what makes you special." The room erupted in applause. John had made his decision. And in that moment, he knew this was just the beginning of a positive change for both Chris and the entire company. Chris's promotion, and the new initiatives Mark introduced began to transform the culture of the entire store. The employees, inspired by Chris's selflessness, felt motivated and more connected to the company's values. The customers, too, could feel the change. They noticed the difference in the way they were treated, and they started coming in more frequently, knowing that they were valued. What had once been just another convenience store was now a place where people felt cared for, not just as customers, but as individuals. The positive ripple effect of Mark's decision didn't just stay at that particular store, it spread across other locations. Mark, determined to make this a model for the rest of his business, began visiting stores regularly, making sure that the culture of kindness and customer service was upheld. Every visit reinforced the idea that Thomas Mart was more than just a chain of stores. It was a community. Employees felt empowered, and many had started going above and beyond, just like Chris had. The stores were no longer just about making sales, they were about making a difference. But the impact didn't stop with just the employees. Mark's decision to set up a fund to support employees in need had a profound effect. It became a safety net for workers who were facing hard times, whether due to medical issues, family emergencies, or other personal struggles. The fund was something that gave the employees a sense of security, knowing that if they ever needed help, the company would have their back. John's leadership had shifted the company's entire approach to business. It was no longer about profits at all costs, but about building a team that cared for one another and for their customers. And it all began with one simple decision: to listen, to observe, and to reward kindness when it was least expected. As John walked through the store one day, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. What had started as an undercover mission had led to a profound change, not just in his stores, but in his heart as well. He had learned that true success wasn't about numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about the people who made the business thrive. And with Chris leading the way, he knew Thomas Mart was on a path to something far greater than he had ever imagined. Wow, what an incredible story of kindness and leadership. Chris went above and beyond for his customers, even though he was facing his own struggles. It's truly inspiring to see how one person's generosity can transform not only their workplace, but also the lives of those around them. What do you think about Mark's decision to reward Chris and support the employees in need? Do you think kindness in the workplace can really change a company's culture like it did at Thomas Mart? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading what you all think and hearing your experiences. Where are you watching from? It's always exciting to see how these stories resonate with people all over the world. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more coming your way, and you won't want to miss the next powerful story that we'll be sharing tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to hear from you. Your feedback means a lot to me, and it helps us keep creating stories that matter.